everyone. Happy Pride. This is Mamas in Miami, and I'm Christy Diaz. Together, we're going to be navigating motherhood with unwavering solidarity of one another and fierce love. Today, we're going to be talking about international surrogacy and egg donorship. We are going to be inviting Anibal Garcia in just a moment. In honor of Pride Month, we're going to be sharing different stories and different information for you. So bear with me while we invite him in and start. We've got a lot of ground to cover today in 30 minutes or less. We are just waiting for Anibal Garcia to join our chat this morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Hi, Anibal.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, I could hear you. I don't need headphones. Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Good, and you? Good morning. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Did you get any sleep last night?
Some. It was my turn to take care of the kids. So I was on duty. I was on duty last night, and I'm on duty today as well.
Oh,
So
we don't we don't want to spoil the end of the surprise for all of our viewers who are just listening in, but we want to thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Good morning, Adri73. Good morning, Judy Mayer. We try to do our show in 30 minutes or less, so we've got a lot of ground to cover, and I just want to jump right in because there's much to talk about. Why don't you start by giving yourself a little intro here?
sure. So my name's Anibal Garcia, born and raised here in Miami. Um, Christy and I have been friends since 2009. I think when we went through St. Jude, right when we were on the board together there,
And
15 years ago.
for those of you that don't know St. Jude, that's St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Anibal and I were one of the founding members of the Friends of St. Jude organization for young professionals when we used to be young professionals.
I'm
Great.
still young, but we're still young professionals, right? When does that? We keep changing the age of what a young professional is, right? Since we
Is
keep aging.
still young professionals, Anibal. Let's go with that. We were there before there was children, before there was spouses.
Yeah,
Wh- When?
yeah.
Would raise funds for St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, which we'll have to talk about that on another. Oh, look, Lourdes Millian. She was also with us at Friends of St. Jude. Hello, Lourdes. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
No, no. So born and raised here in Miami, from a great family. We can literally say hi. Yeah.
Lourdes.
Worked in healthcare and technology for the last 20 years, and just switched now to another technology company. I was at Baptist for 20 years, and now just moved to another company after being there 20 years, and just enjoying life with my husband and my kids.
And how did you meet your husband?
We met on Tinder. Yeah, we met on Tinder. I super liked him. I wasted my one super like, because you get a couple super likes a month. I wasted it on him, which is not a waste, right? Because it ended up being successful. We had our first date the day before my birthday, April 3rd. I remember we went to a Heat game in let's see, 2018. And then the day after, of course, the day of my birthday, I didn't invite him to my birthday because I had just met him, right? Um, and then we had another date after that Thursday, and then ever since it's we've been together now 6 years together total. 3 years married, 6 years together.
And immediately, did you guys know that you wanted to start a family?
Yeah, that was always important to me. I knew I wanted a family since um I had my niece who's 15 years old. I knew when she was born, and I loved her so much. I'm like, I could only imagine how much, if I loved her that much, how much I would love my own kids, right? So I always knew that I wanted to start a family and have kids.
I don't want to give away too much of your story ahead of time, but I have to say that when I ran into your cousin Pepe and he told me that you were going to be a father, I was so incredibly excited because you are such an amazing uncle to Alana that there was nobody more deserving of fatherhood than you. So you decide that you want to start a family. Where do you even start, Anibal? What was your first like, did you go to Google? Did you start looking things up? How did you go about
I
this?
think the easiest way for me was to ask friends, right? Because I have friends who've gone through the process before, whether it was adoption, whether it was surrogacy. So I met with some friends who had adopted, and I met with some friends that have gone through surrogacy, because I knew I wanted to become a dad either which way, right? To me, it didn't matter how I became a dad as long as I became a dad. Um, so we looked at all the options, we looked at adoption. There's multiple ways to adopt, whether it's through foster care or, placement. And then surrogacy, there's multiple ways to go through the whole surrogacy process. Here in the United States, it's quite expensive. So it's about to the whole process for one child would be around $150,000. So in abroad, it's a lot cheaper, right? So we had met a couple that we weren't actually friends with. We became friends with them, and they told us that they had done the process in Colombia, in Barranquilla. So after we got married, we went down there for a weekend just to check out the agency, check out the fertility clinic, and find out more information. And then, my husband and I decided that this wasn't something that we wanted to go into debt to do, right? Because, kids cost a lot of money to begin with, right? So we didn't want to start the process already being in debt. So we decided to do it in Colombia because it is a lot cheaper. It came out to about $40,000 as opposed to $150,000
Is that
per child.
that you pay in installments, or does everything get
Yeah,
like
no, the nice thing too is that, right, that it's not one big payment, right? You pay to make the embryos, you pay to do the transfers, you pay to once the surrogate is pregnant, you pay the surrogate monthly like stipend, and then once the babies are born, you pay them as well. So it's sort of, you could say throughout the whole year, basically you're just sending payment. You feel like an ATM.
I mean, I think you're gonna feel like an ATM for the rest of your life anyways. So you take a trip to Barranquilla and you had a friend's recommendation to go see, is this an international IVF clinic? Is this a hospital? Is this
It's not an agency actually, it's a clinic. It is an IVF clinic called Procrear. And then they do all types of IVF, all types of fertility treatments there. And then there's a nurse that works there that sort of runs the surrogacy program for them. So she basically, it's very different in the US, right? Because in the US, when you're looking for your egg donor, it's like Match.com, right? You see pictures, you see huge profiles, you see videos of the egg donors. Over there, you see a one paragraph piece of paper with no picture, right? So you see their height, their weight, their eye color, their skin color, any medical history. But when I say medical history, I say it very lightly because it's about a paragraph long. So it's very, very different in that sense. So when we went there, we met with the fertility doctor, and she basically asked, what do you want your egg donor to look like? And joking around for me, Shakira's from Barranquilla and so is Sofia Vergara. So I was like, yeah, like Shakira or Sofia Vergara would be nice. But
and
yeah,
um so but you can't confirm or deny that they look like Shakira because there's no photograph.
there's no photograph. Yeah. So we have no idea who that is.
Were
But we know that with technology nowadays, especially like, ancestry DNA and all that stuff is really big in the US right now. And I'm sure by the time the kids are 18, that's going to be worldwide and, with new technology. So I'm sure in the future, we'll be able to figure out who that egg donor was.
so at this point in time, you do not know your egg donor.
We do not know our egg donor. No. No. So we don't know our egg donor. And then the surrogates, the clinic basically finds surrogates for you. So we do know our surrogates, but the surrogate was just a gestational carrier, right? So they have no relation to the baby whatsoever.
Okay, so take me back to the egg donor. So you walk in and they give you one piece of paper with one paragraph, very minimal.
Yeah.
Eye color, height, weight. There's no, you just got to trust that the medical history is all there.
Yes.
Do they ask you how many children do you want right off the bat?
No. They ask us if because both my husband and I went, right. So they asked us whose sperm we're gonna use, and we said, we always knew we wanted multiple kids, and we wanted what we wanted to do, and luckily what happened was we wanted to have two kids, right? One of his sperm, one of my sperm, and then with the same egg donor. That way, the kids themselves are half siblings, right? They're related through the egg donor. So they knew that process. So the first thing we did there is basically they just test your sperm to make sure that you can have kids, right?
And
That's the first step.
yep, and trip to Barranquilla right off the bat, hit the ground running.
Yeah.
So you walk in and you find your egg donor and you leave your sample right then and there.
We leave our sample right then and there, and by the time we're back in Miami, they've already started to make our embryos and freeze them. So it's all very
And
fast.
you have.
Bec- And that process seems fast. I had two embryos, and my husband had three embryos. And then we did the PGD testing, the genetic testing on the embryos. So that took over there, it takes a little longer than the US. It took about a month to get the results, and luckily all the embryos are fine.
Okay, so now we just jumped from egg donor. You get on a plane, you come home, and you find out that you have 5 fertilized eggs.
Yes.
By the time you land in Miami.
Yeah, it was all within a week. It was all very fast. We didn't even realize we had paid it, we didn't realize it was going to be that fast, right? That we were going to have those embryos that fast.
Did any legal scares pop into your head at this point when you find out that you've got fertilized eggs in another country?
No, because I felt at ease at the clinic. Like you could, when we went to visit the clinic, the fertility clinic, we knew it was a legit business, right? I mean, these are doctors. It's been around for 20 something years. It's not something that, we felt like it was sketchy or anything like that. Um, and everything happened so fast. And then my only concern that I always had was, I wonder, my embryos and my husband's embryos have the same egg, they use the same exact egg donor, right? That's the only concern I always had, right? Because you never know, right? Things happen. You've seen movies about fertility clinics, even the US, right, that are respectable and this and that, and then they do sketchy stuff. So that was the only concern that I ever had.
Okay, let's stop right there and just welcome everybody who's joining us for the first time. We are kicking off Pride Month here at Mamas in Miami, and we've got my dear friend Anibal, who's sharing a story, his personal story about international surrogacy. If you are just joining in for the first time, he knew he wanted to be a dad very early on. I'm assuming your spouse did as well. And right after they got married, they jumped on a plane to Barranquilla, Colombia, and they hit the ground running. They'd chosen they left their sperm samples, and by the time they got off the plane, they had fertilized embryos in Colombia waiting for them. So the next step, I would assume, is finding your surrogate, correct?
Yeah. So, and that's a little bit easier because in Barranquilla, obviously because of the money, there's a plethora of women who would love to do this, right? And get paid to carry a baby. And it's pretty similar to the US that in order to be a surrogate, you have to have given birth to your own children first. So it just can't be any woman that wants to be a surrogate. Because they don't want a surrogate to be pregnant for the first time with a baby that they're going to give away, right? They've never been through the process. They don't know they get complications when they get pregnant. So for us, it was more like we didn't even pick our surrogate. It was more like, hey, we have these ladies, and this is what we're gonna do the transfer on these ladies. These are their age. They gave us basic information on them, and you just agree. And then we knew that that was the process, the way we did it there.
It sounds like you have to be very
Yeah,
trusting in an international program. And if
yeah. That's the one thing about it, right? That it's very different, right? Our communication is through WhatsApp, and there's times where you get frustrated because you send a message and you hear back a day later, right? And even more frustrating when they're pregnant already with the babies, right? Because then that's like, you want to know what's going on and things like that. But the nice thing about it is it's a 2.5 hour plane right away, right? So it's something that if at any given moment, if we really felt, that need, we could always just jump on a plane and go over there and see what's going on.
so at this point, financially speaking, you've already made a big deposit for your egg donorship.
Yeah. So at this point, we paid to have the embryos created, right? We paid for the egg donors and for the egg donor, and then we actually created the embryos.
Okay, so that's been paid already in full because as we're paying this in pieces.
Yeah.
Then find your surrogate. And at this point, were you and your husband ready to have two at once? Did you decide, okay, let's have two surrogates. Let's do this all at once?
Yeah. So the process that we always wanted to do there, they won't do two embryos into one surrogate, like one of my husband and one of mine. They don't do it for legal reasons. And, God forbid something happens that me and my husband decide that we're getting divorced in the middle of this process. Then you basically have the babies are born and one of them is not my DNA, one of them is. So it becomes a little complicated. So we knew that we basically wanted to do two transfers at the same time. So basically have two surrogates pregnant at the same time, right? Especially since we were doing it outside of the US. I didn't want to go through this whole process and then have to start all over again. Then it's not the easiest process, and we don't have a lot of control. So I was like, if we can just get through it and be done with it, then that'd be the easiest way to get it done.
And did they just give you a one paragraph paper for the surrogates as well? And just,
Yeah, very similar. Yeah, yeah. We just knew their age. We knew that they had 2 or 3 kids, and that's pretty much it. And and we knew that they had healthy pregnancies, obviously before. But other than that, there was very little to be known there because, from a medical history perspective, as long as the surrogate is healthy and, and we don't want anything to happen to her, right? So as long as she's healthy and she's given birth before and she's perfectly fine, that's all that matters, right? Since they're basically just carrying the baby for you for 9 months.
so we have surrogate A and surrogate B. Surrogate A receives one fertilized embryo. Surrogate, what happens?
So we do an initial transfer, and then just like here, right? When they do the transfer, everything is great. You see the little picture of the round embryo. and then you pray that it sticks. And then we did a week later the second transfer. So we did them really back to back. And then it takes about almost 2 weeks to get the blood work. And we look at the HCG numbers, right? Just like here. And both of those times we had 0 for HCG numbers. It wasn't elevated, right? So they didn't stick. The embryos didn't stick. So we were not pregnant the first 2 transfers.
So we're now down to 3.
We're not just the 3 embryos, 1 being me, 1 of mine, and then 2 of my husband.
How?
So then now it gets you nervous, right? Because at the end of the day, like I would tell Carlos, my husband, I'm like, we only want 2 kids, so we still got it, right? We still have these 3 embryos left, And at the end of the day, we knew it was going to happen sooner or later, right? So now we go through the whole process again with the embryos that we have. They actually find 2 new surrogates, right? Because since they do have surrogates ladies that do want to be surrogates, sometimes if the embryo doesn't stick, they try to find another surrogate in case there was something wrong with the lining for a reason that it didn't stick.
Is there additional fees involved now? You've paid these surrogates and you didn't go through.
But when you do the transfer of the embryo, I think it was like $4,000 for each transfer. So we basically paid for that, and then a week later you find out you're not pregnant, right? So that's when I felt really like an ATM because you're not getting anything out of it. And then you do have to pay the surrogate the monthly fee, right? Because she had to, go to the visits and all that. So you pay the monthly fee, which is about $480 a month that we would pay them. So for those 2 surrogates, even though they never got pregnant, we had to pay them the monthly fee.
Sure. For the time that they
For the time that they spent, for going through the procedure and things like that.
How was it emotionally for you guys when you found out they didn't take?
It was hard, but it wasn't that hard. I always thought of like a woman, right, that has to go through this. Like, I've had cousins that have gone through IVF and all that, where you're supposed to be able to get pregnant, right? We know we can't. We need this help, right? Where there's no way we can have a baby. So for us, it was hard, but it wasn't as hard as I always thought it would be. Like for a woman that was going through this and she just couldn't get pregnant. You hear all these fertility stories of women who go through it and try to get pregnant, and it's years that they're going through this. So it was just, like I said, since we knew we had more embryos, we knew we were going to try again. So we were hoping that, we were going to have success the next time around.
So it was more of a financial hit than emotional.
Yeah. Yeah. And since the payment, like I said, it's not a lump sum, I'm still working. My husband's still working. We're making money, and, we just move on, and time to make another payment, right? For another embryo transfer.
Okay, so now we have 3 fertilized embryos. 2 belong to your husband, 1 belongs to you. We have a surrogate C and a surrogate D.
Yes. Now we do another 2 transfers. We did my transfer first, so that was my last embryo. And then we did my husband's transfer, and then he had 1 embryo left, right? So my last embryo, I did not get pregnant again. And then my husband's embryo, that is our daughter, Anastasia, who's 18 months now. So we did get pregnant with Anastasia with that embryo. So then that throws us for a loop because I ran out of embryos, right?
Right.
So I go back to the clinic, I have to fly back to Colombia, and luckily they were able to get more eggs from that egg donor. And then I was able to, the same exact process I did at the beginning, create more embryos again, leave another sperm sample, and then they were able to create more embryos. And this time I got 5 embryos, just myself. Yeah, so I started all over again, but it threw us for a loop because, we wanted the kids to be born a week apart and I'll explain the process, but when the babies are born, you basically have to move to Colombia for a month, right? To get their paperwork done, to get their passports and all that. So now what I was thinking in my head, like, which is a blessing now that, because of COVID, we were all working from home and all that. So, it didn't matter where I was. But now we have to move to Colombia for 2 months, basically, right? Because we have to move for our daughter whenever she's born. And then again for our future child whenever they're born as well.
And just considering that it's 9:21 and we like to do our program in 30 minutes or less, I just want to remind everybody that you are going to be coming back Friday at 9 a.m. And that's when we're going to discuss all the legalities of when you went to Colombia.
Yeah.
And today we're just going to focus on the IVF because we always try to do our program in 30 minutes or less. Because as you know, you've got the kids you got to get back to. So do we. So with that said, okay, now we have 5 embryos. Team Anibal.
Yeah. So we're pregnant already with 1 baby, right? We know we're pregnant. And then I start to do more transfers. So I did, in total, I'll speed this up because we did 3 additional single transfers that did not stick as well. So then 5 failed transfers. And then at that time, we were already pregnant with Anastasia. So we went to one of the She must have been, there's 6 months apart, 6 months, 5 months already by the time. So we went to Colombia, and at that time I had two embryos left. And, we sat with the doctor because we're like, hey, is there anything else we could do, right? Is there any type of other treatment that we could do to prepare the surrogate better, things like that? And the doctor at that time recommended, well, since, and a key thing here is that they couldn't get any more eggs from the egg donor. So we could always continue the process and make more embryos, but the children wouldn't be half siblings.
Is there a
But ran out of her.
to the egg donor that she's allowed to give? Or is it that she was just not going to?
No, that was it. Yeah, because and think about it, an egg donor, you can go to one clinic and give eggs and go to another clinic and give eggs. There's no way to sort of know how much time that egg donor has given. She just didn't want to give at that time anymore.
Sure.
So then
Okay.
we did we did a few transfers. It didn't work, and then we had two embryos left. And when we went to Barranquilla for one of the sonograms of our first daughter, the doctor was like, "Look, since you have two embryos left and you have had all these failed attempts, let's put two embryos in and see if at least one sticks."
And this was allowed at this point.
Yes, because it's only my DNA in those embryos.
So your DNA can go twins.
Yes, they don't like
Twin-
to do it either, but yeah. The key thing there is that they didn't want to do two when it's the DNA of myself in one embryo and the DNA of my husband in another, because then technically we have no claim to the other kids. It becomes confusing when you do the paperwork.
Understood. Okay.
Yeah. So then we
Free.
do a go ahead.
You still don't have a relationship with your egg donor at this point.
We still do it. No,
Okay.
we have no idea who she is.
You do have a relationship with the surrogate.
Yes. So the one that is pregnant with Anastasia.
And you have just everyday communication with her, or is it
No,
always
it's through the agent. It's through the fertility clinic, and they do that on purpose to protect both people, right? So that way, everything is through them, so that they can reach out to you directly and things like that.
have you ever met her in person at this point?
Yes, when we went for the sonogram, we did the sonogram with her, so that's the first time we met her.
Okay.
So she knows who we are. She's met my husband. She's met me, and it was crazy because even from the sonogram, she looked at my husband and knew that the embryo was his, because the little face, it looked like it was. Yeah, she knew right away which was the baby that she had inside her.
That is amazing. That's like crazy.
I know that is crazy.
So we're in Barranquilla at this point. Anastasia's on her way.
And
She's
she's on her way,
still
huh?
5 months, and you've got 2 embryos left, and the doctor says, let's implant them both.
Yeah, so I have to sign paperwork because the paperwork basically says that I was not going to abort any embryo if multiple pregnancies happen, right? And I said, whatever happens, I'm accepting, right? If two come out, if, you never know what could happen. It could be three, right? You could have an embryo split and you have another one.
Right.
So I signed the paperwork and then we wait. And then they transfer those two embryos. And then it's the process there. Whenever it was bad news, it would always take them forever to get back to us, right? So we waited the 2 weeks. They were going to do the blood test. And then it was during the day, right? Barranquilla's almost the same time zone as us. We didn't hear anything at all. Like sending WhatsApp messages, no answer whatsoever. So I was already, you know what? That's fine. We have a daughter on the way. This didn't work out and this and that. So I remember we were about to go to bed. It was like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And I don't know why the lady did it, but she sent the results to my husband instead of me. And then Carlos showed me the results that we're pregnant. And I'm like, are you lying to me? Like, this is not a good lie, right? Are you lying to me? And then at that time, we know we're pregnant, right? We don't know if one's stuck. We don't know if two stuck, but we know that, there's the HCG numbers are elevated. So we know there's a baby in there.
And should we stop there, or do you want to just?
No, we could finish that part there. We could finish that. Yeah. So then, so we know that the HCG levels are at they're very elevated compared to what the first pregnancy. So I'm like, how many babies are in there? I got a little scared. And then, we ended up, they do the first sonogram, and it was funny because they were going to do the first sonogram October 15th, I remembered. And we were going to be on our baby moon, right? We went on a Virgin cruise. So I was like, perfect, we're going to be on a cruise, relax. We're going to find out if there's 1 or 2 babies and, we're not going to worry anything. So I remember it was a Friday, the day before. We hadn't left on the cruise yet because I was working half a day that morning. I'm on a one-on-one with one of my employees, just like this. And I get a text message on WhatsApp, and it's just a sonogram. And you see the two fetuses. And then it's just a lady sends me a picture of a dancing cat. So and I wasn't expecting I wasn't expecting the message at that moment, right? So I replied to her in Spanish, "Are they two?" And she's like, "Yes." I'm like, and all I replied back, I have the screenshot. All I replied back was, "Oh my God."
Did you
So,
pass out?
no, I was on camera with my employee, and I remember it was Christian, and he's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "No, I'm not okay."
And
So yeah, so
has been cooking for how long at this point?
at that Anastasia, well, there's still 5 months. So the kids were born 5 months, 6 months apart, 5 months apart. So then I was super happy, not only for being pregnant, right?
They have
But
twins on the way.
yes, we find that we have twins on the way, and they were due in May. So the great thing is that they were still all gonna be in the same grade because Anastasia was born in December, and then the twins were born in May. So for all intents and purposes, they're almost triplets, right? Like as babies, you could tell the age difference, but now that they're growing up and getting into ones and 1.5, and just the twins just turned one, they're getting becoming the same age. So yeah, we went from 0 to 3 very fast.
So there it is, guys. That's the big surprise that I was hinting at the very beginning. He went from 0 and splash.
Yeah.
Um, so you get on your baby moon and you are in full.
I didn't sleep that week. No, I didn't sleep that cruise. I didn't sleep that cruise because, I always thought two babies at the same time, two parents, one can carry each and all that. And then I'm like, how are we going to fit a third crib? Like, so, so many things start to go through your mind, right? And I really didn't think both were going to stick, right? Since we had so many failed attempts, it wasn't, I welcomed it. I knew that it was a possibility, but I really didn't think that we were going to end up with twins.
And those were your last two embryos.
And those are my last two embryos. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
So yeah, my husband still has one embryo left, and I always say, "Should we try for a fourth?" And he thinks I'm crazy, and I am crazy. I wouldn't do it, but I feel so bad for that last embryo that's left.
So you say that the finances, you felt like an ATM. What did you feel in that moment when you realized, holy cow, like, is there more money to be spent in the fertility process when you have triplets? Or I
No,
mean,
it
not.
isn't actually that's the one thing I always say. The twins is like a Publix BOGO deal. It's like buy one get one free. Because in total, from a single pregnancy to a twin pregnancy, it's a $3,000 difference. So I don't think it's that big of a deal, right? After spending all this money, $3,000 is not that much more because she's carrying two.
Have you ever heard of the I Get Pena fund when somebody gets married?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for those of you that don't know what the I Get Pena fund, that is what Cubans refer to it when their daughter or their son is getting married. That at that point you've spent so much money on the wedding, you're like, I get pena, we really need this, guys, and that is just woof. So what's another?
Yeah,
You know.
it's another three at that point. It's like when someone remodels a house, right? At that point, you're spending money left and right, and money becomes nothing because you're not used to sending out that much money, but that's what you do on a daily basis, right?
So that's all the time we have for this part of your journey today. Please join us again Friday at 9 a.m. I would love to talk more about. You now have triplets on the way in another country. You mentioned that you had to spend 2 months in Colombia when when Anastasia was born. I assume you're back again when the twins were born also. And I want to know like what what the legal nuances are that you had to go through with bringing all three children back into the United States. So please join us on Friday at 9 a.m. Anibal, thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Bye.
Bye.